I'm Giogio Fedon. I'm talking about penetration testing corporate collaboration portals here at AthCon. Firstly, what are corporate collaboration portals? We are going deeply about this definition during the talk, so I will talk about it later. Why I'm going to talk about collaboration portals? During our last penetration testing activities, we saw that they are going a path in the web application development where sharing portal frameworks are used to build any portal. For example, if you need a simple portal, in the past you use the .NET framework, or you just use the PHP simple script, or you used some Cold Fusion application. Now, there is a trend in web application development. Excuse me, can you lower the mic? Because I'm talking to myself in the ears. There is this path in building application where there are added more features than the features that are really needed. This particular trend is about implementing your custom portal upon a corporate collaborative portal. Something about me. In the spare time, I'm a security researcher. I'm a OWASP Italy board member. I do web application research, and I published or I contributed at many security advisories in applications like SAP, JBoss, application of Computer Associates, or Adobe. During my daily job, I contribute in security application design. I do code reviews, banking malware reverse engineering and analysis, and penetration testing. Corporate collaboration portals. Corporate collaboration portals is something like a definition, or my definition, of application frameworks that can be customized in such a way that they will fit almost any application, any corporate portal need. In a few words, are frameworks or softwares that empower any user to actively interact with corporate assets, people, and data. From Wikipedia, the features are huge in a sense that they help you managing provisioning of internet portals, extranet, websites, wiki modules, forums, chatting, and internal messaging, and so on. This is taken from CJG latest Sharepoint 2010 jokes. I didn't add, I changed a couple of information there because it was, one of the jokes is a hacker was asked how much he would charge to steal information for a company. The inquirer says, it's a sharing portal. And the hacker replied in his best Thailand voice, easy, only $5. This is not always true, but is to give an idea on a trend and on what could be the danger associated to not observing best practices in developing in implementing these frameworks. Common scenarios to take into account is that people usually make these particular frameworks dirty. They start with a good configured application, then they start adding features, disabling security groups, disabling security features, uploading documents with exploits inside, or uploading malware to the same site where there are the file sharing, where the file sharing is. They seem easy to manage apparently, in a sense that there is a wizard for installing it, but unfortunately for advanced feature there isn't a button for anything. So if you want to make a strong or you have to modify the portal, you have to go manually. And going manually to such portals is never so easy. Many times, a lot of features are exposed without least privilege. So they are exposed even if you do not know what is exposed. They are patched very slowly because they are a certified solution many times. There are boxes and infrastructure that are sold like it, and they are patched and maintained by some partners and not directly by the organization. And last but not least, many times are on the front line, in a sense that usually people think that sharing portal is something that inside the internet that talks to a backend where they keep their data. They keep their data on a database, and they have a user directory to interact with their users. What many people do not care about is that the sharing portal may be exposed to the internet, because there is this new trend in having CMS functionalities or managing the external portal, which is just an extension of the sharing portal. This bad habit, or if this new kind of fashion in web application development can keep your sharing portal and internet at risk, because internet clients or external clients may be able to directly interact with the sharing portal. If I ask you, which application do you think which is a very used sharing portal? Which one? Microsoft? Yes, it's one, thank you. But I see many times this particular application. How many in the room know this particular software? So there are some people that know the software. Liferay is a portal collaboration framework written in Java 2 Enterprise Edition. It's available in two flavors. There is an enterprise version and a community version. They are very similar. We did code reviews for enterprise and community edition, and we saw that what is really different between the two is the support. It's very used in new developments because it's open source. And when I mean used, I mean it's very used. If you look at URL that expose Liferay portals, you see numbers that are around millions of findings. Liferay is very, very used. You know this is something like a statement from the Linux community, given enough evils or bugs are shallow. Unfortunately, experience says that software is not secure just because it's open source. That's why we need to test it. I came across many customers that says, okay, this software is very secure because it's open source, but since if a software is open source, doesn't mean that a lot of people have looked into the code base or just they use it. It depends on how many people use it. Liferay, for example, has a public Atlassian Jira, a backtracking system with free anonymous browsing. You can go to issues, liferay.com, secure issues navigator, and you see something like that. This is free, and is, with anonymous access, you can go to this part. I would like to remember you that hackers usually tries to get access to Jira or backtracking system softwares. They did that for Apache, but they are usually not publicly exposed because people give information about vulnerabilities and any other kind of threat. unfortunately for Liferay is not the process. Liferay have security issues rated critical that are already public. If you go to that website and you go around, I just added it while I was modifying my slides a couple of minutes ago. I was browsing the internet and I found this new, I think that is a new one, this one, security issue on chat portal. Step to reproduce. So you have the vulnerabilities, you have the step to reproduce, everything is public, and unfortunately is unresolved and is already rated critical. So if you want to find 0 days for this platform, you just have to go to that site and browse and find the one that most suits your need for exploiting. Liferay is known to have the following issues: reflected cross-scripting, stored cross-scripting. Do you know what a cross-scripting is? I think that everyone here knows about it. But anyway, it's possible to have the clients automatically executing JavaScript in many different ways into this portal. There are many information leakages, JSON service information leakages, multiple module remote code execution. There is a web interface information disclosure. These vulnerabilities can be found around all Liferay versions. In this example, I show you a cross-scripting for version 4, but just because I add it on one of our reports, and this is the place where the cross-scripting is. And on newer version, maybe it's not that field, but if you go around and you, for example, we did code reviews of Liferay, but we found so many cross-scriptings that, for example, we made some examples and we didn't signal all the, report all the issues because there were a lot. Administrators, of course, of the portal, if you change, these are personal information, so you can modify your own information, will execute that particular script upon they will see the list of the users, so you can take over the administrator account, for example. Then there are other issues, since cookies are not marked, are HTTP only, and so on. JSON information leakage. We found JSON information leakage around different versions. This one I show you is an advisory we already published some months ago, and was about the get role users in the JSON service. You can find this advisory here. And this particular request can be triggered by any user. You have to be an authenticated user, but can be done by any user of any privilege. And the result is that you will have a response that contains user password hashes. Passwords are by default hashed using SHA-1 with no salt, so password can be recovered. An example of response, you have Liferay admin, password, base 64 encoded version of the SHA-1 password. You have post-authentication code, remote code execution in different modules. For example, we found in different version calendar module that has a feature to export calendar information to a text file. This text file is temporarily copied to a temp location, but you can manipulate both the extension and the path where this file is saved. And the result is that you can save a GSP file to the web server path, so you reach remote code execution. In older version of Liferay, this is straightforward, but it still works also on newer version. Anyway, it's not so easy as reported in the advisory, but it's possible. At the moment, we have several unreleased issues on the newest version of Liferay. Version affected are Liferay 5, maybe also 6. Since community edition has a public JIRA, even people that are willing to do responsible disclosure will end up in full disclosure, because everything you report is published to the world. But we still believe in responsible disclosure, so we are trying to contacting Liferay developers for having this bug fixed before going public, and usually we reach this goal. So visit our website in the future for updates and more information about this. Anyway, if you download Liferay and you start looking for storage process scripting, you will find some for sure. So it's an easy task. Another software that is very used is Microsoft Sharepoint. Microsoft Sharepoint is maybe one of the most known Microsoft products up to date, because it's part of the Office family, which is one of the most successful software in history, and is a very good product. Sharepoint is very well coded and has a lot of features. It's written in .NET upon .NET 3.5 SP1 framework. This means that is made up of ASPX file, handlers, and is made up of .NET C# bytecode DLLs. This means that can be reverse engineered like almost instantly, because you just have to open Reflector and going into the DLLs, so you can see the source code of Sharepoint. I don't know if it's possible by the DMCA Act, but it's something like that is offered the possibility to also to extend the DLLs, etc. is inside the license. Sharepoint has a lot of features. For example, it has collaboration modules, portals, has an enterprise search for enterprise scalability, contextual relevance, etc. As a really successful content management system, because you have something like the Microsoft Word interface, where you can change the color of the fonts, then you can change the layouts and so on. Very well implemented. As business processes like web-based business processes form, single sign-on, as business intelligence modules, all this stuff together. But you will find these modules also in portals that should only use the content management system. Maybe they are not directly reachable because you didn't activate some module, but usually when you install Sharepoint, you find inside the DLLs that are installed also many of the other modules. Sharepoint, as we said, is a complex architecture, has millions of .NET lines of code. So looking at the entire code base is very complex. Settings are very granular and need very specific knowledge to be applied correctly. Now there is a question, can your organization or your partners configure it correctly? Because too many times the problems are related to not correct configuration of Sharepoint services. It's so easy to not configure it correctly. There are many features available on a default installation. Do you need all of them in your common setup? Several functionalities need integration with Active Directory. Is it that good in a case where the portal is also exposed to the internet? So, if you have a Sharepoint installation, is it a good suggestion to test how your partner has implemented it, how your developer has installed it? Because you think to find a lot of experts about this infrastructure, but since infrastructure are very complex, it's difficult to find people that know all different aspects of these frameworks. For example, this is what happened in everyday assessments, is that Sharepoint has config settings, since Sharepoint is a common web.NET application, so has web config and all the other stuff like any other .NET application. Sysadmins make mistakes in modifying directly Sharepoint config files. Configuration are often modified to add encryption, for example, to secrets using the RSA protected configuration provider, and so on, for mitigating against potential issues like path traversal. A path traversal is the first enemy for configuration files, because if someone can download the configuration files with passwords or secrets in clear text, as we see later, it can do a lot of damage against the application. So one mitigation for not transforming a medium risk vulnerability like a path traversal into a high risk vulnerability is that there is the mitigation of encrypting the configuration. From the vendor, Sharepoint overrides web config and other configuration files during startup. Configurations should be edited only in XML files under the Sharepoint config directory. So this is something that is not known to everybody. It's something that is quite weird for a .NET application. Usually you modify the web.config, you think that are okay because Sharepoint gets the changes, because any time that you modify the web config, .NET recompiles the DLL in the temporary directory. Unfortunately, the process next time that is started or is patched, it will overwrite the web config again, so you will get the old configurations. Configuration is also a manual process. For example, a common scenario is the one where you have an internal web application and you have to create the external part. For creating an external application, you have to go to create or extend web application and start creating an extranet site. The suggested authentication is the form-based authentication. This for Sharepoint 2007. Now Sharepoint 2010 has also the team authentication based upon the Windows Identity Foundation APIs, which is a bit different. But anyway, this is the reference from Microsoft Developer Network for implementing extranet Sharepoint websites. This is the page from the Sharepoint administration where you choose to use the form authentication for the extranet website. So the authentication method, the suggested authentication method is forms. So as you know, form authentication tickets can be recreated if machine key, so if the secrets are recovered from a remote machine. If an attacker is able to recover the machine key and you're using form-based authentication, the attacker could be able to forge form authentication tickets and to impersonate any user. How the attack may work. During the end of last year, during September, two researchers presented a new kind of attacks against web application, and that particular attack was named the padding oracle. I think that you read about it. I published the first exploit against the .NET application based upon the research of Tai and Duong the 21st of September last year. And even if they already exploited that problem, nobody had before published a working exploit. I did the first working exploit some days before Brian Holyfield, and the this attack consisted in exploiting a vulnerability by which, if correctly exploited, could let an attacker to dump a web config, getting the machine key in clear text, and then forge any authentication ticket. This particular issue, anyway, you can fix it by just installing now the Microsoft 010, 060, 070. This kind of vulnerability is very important against SharePoint installations for some reasons. As I told you before, SharePoint is running on .NET 3.5 SP1 framework. .NET 3.5 SP1 is that framework that permits not only to exploit padding oracle to decrypt information, but you can also encrypt, and using the script handler, the script handler functionalities to download any file that you specify. In this case, you can exploit this vulnerability and then download the web config. Inside the web config, you will find the machine key for that particular SharePoint installation, because SharePoint usually keeps the machine key inside the web config, and after you can forge authentication tickets. Anyway, this is the attack scenario. I will not go deeply into it because it's a very long discussion about padding oracle and cryptographic systems and protocols, etc. But a really interesting thing is that you can passively check it. You can passively check if the remote application has installed this patch. So you can make a crawler that goes around the internet and checks all SharePoint installation if they applied or not this particular patch. For example, I wrote at that time a simple tool that used to get the encrypted string for a script handler, for a script handler functionality in .NET, because these encrypted strings you find in webresource.asmx functionality into the HTML code, so you can find for any website that using SharePoint in the login page or in custom web parts pages these particular strings, and then check with this tool if the site is vulnerable or not. So if the site is vulnerable, you can continue with the attack I showed in the previous slide. For more information, there is a full post that talks about it. So, SharePoint site may be on the internet frontline, in a sense that there are two SharePoint administrations. There is the central SharePoint administration, which is the administration for all applications and all websites, and then any website that you create as is a particular website administration. So you have the central administration for all the website, and then a particular administration area for privileged users, and also the same and more via web services. The fact is that by default, these functionalities are on a different port, but the specific administration area is on the same port of your principal website. So what does it mean? That also the SharePoint administration may be reachable from the internet within your corporate web parts. Web parts are the extension where you put your custom HTML that looks like your corporate portal. Before, as I was talking before, this was your corporate portal. You use many times SharePoint just like a CMS tool, etc. If you search on Google, for example, some information about files that can be exposed by SharePoint, you have a full list herein. So there is in FastDB, in Google Code, you find many files that are exposed by default by SharePoint, and you can search around Google like that, and you will find a lot of military or organizations that are exposing to the internet their full asset through SharePoint. This is from my own setup. This is the same. I searched for SharePoint Services Discovery, and if you click on SharePoint Services Discovery, you see all the services that you expose through your website. If you have a reachable SharePoint interface many times, if you have web parts that also share the authentication, that shares SharePoint authentication, pointing to direct URLs, you may be able to see content like this one. For example, the documents that are hosted, or the name of the documents. Or, for example, if you go to user disp.aspx, you could be able to enumerate the name of the users, just changing the ID value, so you can get the name of the users. Of course, there is the problem of cross-scripting. SharePoint administration could have some cross-scripting, but are very difficult to find because the code base of SharePoint is very good. Also, the website area may have some. You couldn't be sure 100% that is safe against cross-scripting, but the place where is most easy, or where you most easily will find cross-scripting, is here, where you have your custom web parts, you have your custom corporate code to show your information about your website. So there, it's very easy to find cross-scriptings. So if you find cross-scripting there, since the port is the same, like is the port and the domain are the same of the SharePoint administration, you could be able to mount attacks also against the SharePoint administration. So take care of your custom web parts area. Web services are granted free functionalities to anonymous users. Example for anonymous hacker that reported to ZDI a Microsoft SharePoint 0-day is that attackers may be able to file upload documents to SharePoints and reaching remote code execution through that upload. Details says that this is a SOAP request, so is against the web services, and authentication is not required to exploit this vulnerability. In reality, also in SharePoint 2010, there are several issues that do not need authentication. Under VTI BIN is the same path where the web services are located. There are some functionalities that let an attacker to do things without being authenticated. For example, there is a functionality that is called the WAC proxy, which is a proxy server that is able to contact external website, can let an attacker to port scan the internet, give some sanitized content, and so on. So an example is that you can build a port scanner from the internet to the internet using WAC proxy, because if the request for a page exists, it will answer with 404 error code. If the port is closed on the host you are specifying, it will have a long socket timeout and then showing another page. For example, in this case, I will make my SharePoint installation contacting google.com. That SharePoint installation will contact for me Google without being authenticated. The response if the port is open is web exception 404 not found. If the port is closed, you get this other error. For example, this is this is the pickup from my SharePoint installation. So you see the request. So you could be able also to send GET request to internal machine bypassing the firewall, and the machine, my protected machine that is trying to contact me, that is trying to contact an internet website. This issue could be also used to exploit DNS could also be useful for DNS poisoning attacks, because if you specify domain names that needs a primary DNS for be resolved, you could try to see if they have patched or not their DNS against the Daminsky bug. So if you, in a way or in other way, there are issues that do not need authentication to be exploited. There are other issues with the SharePoint 2010 and Active Directory. From Microsoft How-To, in this blog on Blogspot, SharePoint 2010 version doesn't allow you to be mounted as a farm installation on a single machine using local accounts. In a few words, if you do not use Active Directory accounts, you get limited functionalities in SharePoint 2010. There are, of course, different workarounds, but this is not the suggested way by the vendor. In SharePoint, through web services, any user, any authenticated user, can issue full legitimate Active Directory request against the domain controller. So this is another issue to take into account if you share the authentication with your external portal. Because, for example, there are some features that allows to get a lot of information. For example, there is a search principles method, and then get all user collection from web. For example, if you issue with a legitimate federation authentication ticket of unprivileged users, you issue this particular request with one letter, a lot of results, and you specify all here for the principal type. In the response, you get the users, you get the emails of the whole company, the whole corporate, you get operational units, you get groups. So we found the installation of SharePoint where you could register as an internet user because the portal was a portal to see your electricity bills, for example. That was built on SharePoint. The authentication was shared through the web part and SharePoint authentication. Then you had web services exposed, and you could browse the Active Directory of the company through the internet. So this is not a Microsoft mistake. This is a configuration and setup mistakes. Conclusion. Too often, vulnerabilities in SharePoint's portal are caused by configuration issues. Patching is a weird process too. Sysadmins tend to apply anytime the critical updates, because Microsoft has different levels of updates. There are the critical ones, etc. For example, the patch I showed you before was important and not critical. So sometimes there is the wrong assumption that critical vulnerabilities are remotely exploitable and important vulnerabilities not. If you do not apply some security patches, you can get in trouble. And you should verify that administrative interfaces are not exposed to the internet. Administrative interfaces, I consider administrative interfaces also the CMS or the SharePoint single site administration. Do not expose the sharing portal JSON services, like in the example of Liferay. Do not share web services to the internet. Verify your corporate portals require code reviews if the portal is based upon Liferay. Do code reviews on custom Sharepoint web parts, which is the custom code that your developers add to Sharepoint for having the CMS functionalities working. Penetration test it and verify multiple times if the settings have been applied correctly, because web config may be overwritten the next time you reboot the system. These are some Sharepoint security reference. Thank you. This was my presentation. There are questions about it? Yes, I don't know if you hear the question. The question was about the fact that what you could do, what you can do for patching. For patching, you can of course modify the configuration of the application, because it's a .NET application. You can change the config. The .config files, and they have a huge amount of security features, so you can block particular paths, etc. You can buy security products from Microsoft, because Microsoft gives their reverse proxy that blocks this kind of things. They have front security for SharePoint that checks for security and viruses on the But the first factor is that you have to know where the problems are, because too many times the security or the IT is not aware that they have an unsecure SharePoint installation. Any more questions? Thank you very much.